Welcome to the Mysterious Casebook. Tonight, we step beside a quiet sleuth as an untouched umbrella appears where no rain has fallen and whispers of a hidden truth stir beneath the village calm. Are you listening in the hush of night or during your morning tea? Like and subscribe to join the investigation. Now draw the curtains close and let the mystery begin. The morning in St. Mary Mead had begun with the sort of soft, forgiving light that made even the hedgerows look content with themselves. A thin breeze carried the scent of damp earth, though no rain had touched the village since Thursday. Miss Marple noticed this small contradiction as she passed the green, her knitting bag tucked neatly at her elbow. The tranquility felt perfectly ordinary, yet somewhere beneath it, like a clock hesitating between ticks, a faint disturbance waited its moment to show. It came, as such things often did, through conversation rather than catastrophe. Young Lily Price, the maid at the vicarage, was hurrying toward the high street with cheeks flushed in a way that suggested more than brisk walking. She paused only long enough to greet Miss Marple, but her eyes kept darting back toward the center of the green. Miss Marple followed the girl's glance and saw the peculiar object that had clearly unsettled her, a black umbrella standing upright in the middle of the lawn, as if someone had driven its tip into the earth. Its canopy was furled tight, perfectly dry, and gleamed oddly in the sunlight. No rain, Miss Marple thought. Not even dew heavy enough to warrant such protection. By the time she reached the edge of the green, 2 other villagers had gathered. Mr. Denholm, the postmaster, whose authority on village happenings came not from wisdom but from handling the letters of everyone else, and Mrs. Hartnell, who never resisted the chance to involve herself in something potentially improper. Both were looking at the umbrella with the wary curiosity reserved for anything that did not fit the neat compartments of their lives. Left there on purpose, if you ask me, Mrs. Hartnell declared, arms folded in judgment. People don't forget umbrellas on clear mornings. Mr. Denholm grunted. Could be a child playing a prank, or one of them tourists. They do strange things for photographs. Miss Marple said nothing at first. Her gaze traced the umbrella's shaft, noting the polished wood, the silver band near the handle, and the small indentation in the grass around it. Someone had placed it with care. Not tossed, not dropped. Set. That deliberate gesture, so outwardly harmless, cast the smallest ripple over the calm surface of village routine. Reverend Leonard Clement approached at last, summoned by Lily's breathless report. He gave the object a cautious tug and removed it from the earth. A faint mark lay beneath it, a circle of disturbed soil darker than the rest of the lawn. He turned the umbrella over in his hands. No initials, he murmured. No maker's mark, either. Odd. Suspicious, more like, Mrs. Hartnell retorted. Things don't appear for no reason. Miss Marple noticed how Lily hovered behind the group, arms tight across her body, her attention fixed on the disturbed patch of ground rather than the umbrella itself. Something had startled the girl, though perhaps she didn't yet know how to name it. Before anyone could speculate further, Colonel Melrose arrived with his usual purposeful stride. He examined the umbrella briefly, then the mark beneath. "Best leave it for Inspector Graves," he said. Could be nothing, but could be something best handled properly. He did not voice that everyone silently understood strange objects in the open often led to uncomfortable discoveries in the hedgerows. As the villagers dispersed, Miss Marple remained a moment longer, kneeling with a grace surprising for her age. She brushed her fingertips lightly across the soil. The indentation was deeper on one side, as though the umbrella had been angled before being straightened, almost as if someone had hesitated in placing it. Hesitation, she reflected, was rarely meaningless. A dim unease threaded itself through her thoughts. Not fear, precisely, but the recognition of something slightly out of place, the way a crooked picture frame unsettles a tidy room. She rose carefully, watching as the umbrella was carried toward the vicarage for safekeeping. Lily's uneasy expression lingered in Miss Marple's mind. and the dark mark on the ground held the faintest whisper of a story not yet told, waiting for someone patient enough to listen. Miss Marple walked slowly toward the lane leading to the high street, the memory of Lily's troubled face accompanying her like a faint shadow. The village around her had already begun to hum with the quiet stirrings of curiosity. Curtains lifted, front doors opened with more briskness than usual, and the subtle choreography of gossip set itself into motion. By the time Miss Marple reached the post office, the subject of the umbrella had spread faster than the news of a new curate. Inside, the air smelled of string, stamped envelopes, and the slightly metallic tang of the sorting table. Mrs. Finch, who prided herself on receiving information first and distributing it with editorial care, stood behind the counter with an expression of gleeful solemnity. "Of course you've heard," she began before Miss Marple even reached the front, "that someone's gone and planted a great black umbrella smack in the middle of the green. Gives one the shivers, doesn't it?" Miss Marple offered a polite nod, observing the tightness around Mrs. Finch's mouth. Fear, she knew, often disguised itself as indignation. "I expect there's a simple explanation," she said mildly. "Oh, there's explanations and there's explanations," Mrs. Finch replied darkly. "And none of them are good if you ask me. Mrs. Hartnell says it's a sign, a warning, though of what she didn't specify." Miss Marple suspected Mrs. Hartnell would specify it soon enough and loudly once she shaped the drama to her liking. Before she could excuse herself, the door swung open and swept Mr. Lionel Denholm, the postmaster, looking thoroughly pleased with himself. He placed a parcel down with unnecessary weight. "Inspector Graves has been notified," he announced. "Colonel Melrose asked me to ring him. Said it might be connected to—" He caught sight of Miss Marple and hesitated. Well, best not to alarm anyone prematurely. Mrs. Finch leaned forward eagerly. "Connected to what, Mr. Denholm?" I said nothing. He deflected, though his eyes sparkled with the thrill of possibility. Miss Marple stepped aside to let Mrs. Weatherby pass, the elderly woman whispering, "It's unlucky, you know, an unused umbrella left open to the sky. Bad omen, my mother always said." She scurried out before Miss Marple could ask whether omens typically involved immaculate silver trims and deliberate placement. Outside again, Miss Marple paused near the bakery window, where the scent of rising dough mingled with the frosted sweetness of almond buns. She noticed Mrs. Price Ridley marching up the street, head held high as if she were the sole defender of village propriety. When she caught sight of Miss Marple, she slowed, arranging her features into grave concern. "My dear Jane, you've seen it, I presume?" she asked. "The umbrella?" Most unsettling. And at the green of all places, where children play. It speaks of carelessness at the very least. "Or intentionality," Miss Marple murmured, watching the woman's reaction. Mrs. Price Ridley stiffened. "Intentional? What could be the intention? One does not simply plant an umbrella as if it were a flag, especially not one of such quality." Colonel Melrose said as much. I was present, of course. Miss Marple remembered she had not been, but Mrs. Price Ridley preferred to recount events as if she were always centrally involved. It lent her pronouncements weight, or so she believed. As the woman bustled on, Miss Marple turned toward the vicarage, drawn by a faint instinct rather than any clear plan. The umbrella, placed there with such inexplicable purpose, had unsettled her not because of what it was, but because of how people reacted to it. Fear disguised as etiquette, curiosity masquerading as civic concern, excitement wrapped in solemnity. Objects seldom lied, but people often did sometimes without realizing it. Near the vicarage gate, Lily was sweeping the path with unnecessary vigor. The girl paused when she saw Miss Marple, lowering her head as though embarrassed by her earlier anxiety. "Feeling better, dear?" Miss Marple asked gently. Lily nodded, though not convincingly. "I didn't mean to make a fuss, Miss Marple. It's just I don't like things being out of place, that's all." "A perfectly sensible dislike," Miss Marple said. "Was it the umbrella itself that frightened you? Or something about how it was left?" Lily's grip tightened on the broom. It looked wrong, as though it didn't belong to the person who put it there. She blinked, unsure of her own meaning. "I know that sounds silly." "Not silly at all," Miss Marple said softly. "People leave traces of themselves in the smallest actions." Before Lily could reply, Reverend Clement called from the doorway. "Miss Marple, Inspector Graves is on his way. Says he'll want to examine the umbrella and the green." He sounded concerned. The girl's face paled slightly, and Miss Marple noticed the way her eyes flicked once more toward the hollowed patch of soil on the green, as if expecting some further revelation to rise from it. Miss Marple followed her gaze, sensing the faint tremor running beneath the village's bright surface. Something stirring, preparing to breach the calm. Inspector Graves arrived with the brisk, composed stride of a man who disliked mysteries on pleasant mornings. His coat was buttoned too neatly for the warm air, and he greeted Miss Marple with a nod, suggesting both respect and mild apprehension he never quite knew when she would quietly dismantle his assumptions. The vicar guided him toward the table where the umbrella now lay, its dark fabric absorbing the light rather than reflecting it. Graves studied it without touching. "Strange place to leave something like this," he murmured. "Too deliberate. Too central." His eyes lifted toward the green visible through the vicarage window, and far too conspicuous for someone trying not to be noticed. Miss Marple observed how he leaned slightly closer to the handle, noting the silver band with a faint, nearly rubbed pattern. Not initials, not decoration, more like the ghost of something once engraved and later erased. Graves straightened. "Any sightings this morning? Anyone behaving oddly?" Reverend Clement offered a helpless shrug. "Only Lily saw it first. Everyone else came after." Miss Marple hesitated to volunteer the girl's unease. She sensed it would be more useful when Lily herself found words for it. Graves carried the umbrella outside with careful, gloved precision, approaching the patch of disturbed soil on the green. A small cluster of villagers watched from scattered distances, pretending to go about their errands while ensuring they did not miss anything important. Mrs. Hartnell, of course, hovered nearest. "Inspector," she called as though addressing a stage audience. "You ought to dig. Something might be buried there. People don't stick umbrellas in the ground for innocent reasons." "Thank you, Mrs. Hartnell," Graves replied without enthusiasm. "We'll see what's warranted." He examined the indentation, running the tip of his pen around the edge. "Depth is uneven," he noted. "Someone pressed it in at an angle, then corrected it. That suggests hesitation." "Hesitation," Miss Marple echoed softly, her gaze drifting to the cottages bordering the green. "A curious thing. People hesitate when they're uncertain or when they're reconsidering." Graves glanced at her, waiting for elaboration, but she offered none. She had formed impressions, not conclusions. He stood. "I'll want statements. Anyone who was out early." He scanned the green. "Mr. Denholm, you open the post office before 8, don't you?" The postmaster puffed up. "Of course, and I can assure you I saw nothing unusual. Except Mrs. Weatherby's cat sitting on the lamppost base again." Mrs. Weatherby bristled in the background. Tobermory is a creature of habit. Graves jotted something in his notebook, though likely not about the cat. His gaze shifted toward Miss Marple. "You walk most mornings. Did you notice anything strange? Unusual sounds? Someone leaving in a hurry?" Miss Marple considered carefully. Only young Lily seemed unsettled. And the umbrella itself, well, it looked placed rather than dropped. Graves nodded as though confirming something he'd been reluctant to voice. A good quality umbrella left in the center of a village green is odd enough. But one with its marks scrubbed off? That's strange. A hush fell over the small group. The detail engraving eraser carried the faint, metallic ring of intention. Mrs. Hartnell's eyes widened triumphantly. I said it was a warning. Miss Marple did not contradict her, though she privately suspected the meaning was more personal and less theatrical than Mrs. Hartnell imagined. As the inspector directed a constable to cordon off the area, more symbolic than necessary in such a small village. Miss Marple drifted a few paces away, her attention caught by a subtle disturbance near the hedgerow. A thread of fabric pale, almost white, clung to a bramble branch, trembling lightly in the breeze. She moved closer without drawing attention and examined it, fine material, possibly from a blouse or handkerchief. Not torn violently, more like snagged during a hurried movement. Appearances deceive, she reflected. People think evidence lies in what is placed deliberately. Often the truth hides in what is left behind by accident. She made a mental note, but did not touch the thread. The inspector would find it soon enough or not. Sometimes clues needed to surface at the right moment. As she turned back, she saw Lily standing on the path again, hands clasped tightly in front of her. The girl's eyes were fixed on the umbrella now resting against the inspector's case, and something in her expression suggested recognition she had not intended to reveal. Miss Marple approached gently. "Lily, dear, are you quite sure you've never seen that umbrella before?" The girl was startled. "No, Miss Marple. I don't think so." Her uncertainty betrayed more than her words. Miss Marple lowered her voice so the inspector couldn't overhear. "Sometimes we notice things long before we understand them." Lily's gaze flickered once more to the silver band, then away quickly, as though a thought had brushed against her mind and disappeared before she could hold it. A subtle shift, Miss Marple noted, tinny, but unmistakable. Something had stirred beneath the surface of Lily's recollection. The hesitation in Lily's eyes lingered like a faint tremor, and Miss Marple watched her retreat toward the vicarage door with the air of someone escaping her own thoughts. Inspector Graves, meanwhile, had turned his attention back to the gathered villagers, and Miss Marple could sense the atmosphere shifting. The early uncertainty, soft as morning mist, had begun to harden into speculation of more dangerous weather entirely. Mr. Denholm was the first to step forward with a nervous clearing of his throat. "Inspector, I should mention I did see someone out by the green rather early, before I opened the post office. But I didn't think much of it at the time." Graves focused on him with sudden precision. "Who was it?" "Well," Denholm said, straightening as though bracing for a draft, "it looked like Henry Mullins. You know how he is wandering about at odd hours. Could have been him placing the thing." A small ripple of murmurs passed through the watchers. Henry Mullins, the gardener who worked at several cottages around the village, was known for keeping odd hours and an even odder silence. He rarely spoke, rarely smiled, and kept to himself in a way that made people whisper, simply because he gave them nothing else to do. Graves folded his arms. "Mr. Mullins is on his rounds this morning?" Mrs. Weatherby leaned in eagerly. "I saw him heading toward the Grange not 20 minutes ago, carrying that battered satchel of tools. Never look anyone in the eye." "He's shy," Miss Marple supplied gently, though she knew this would do nothing to ease the village's inclination toward suspicion. Quiet people drew louder accusations. Graves made a note. "I'll have a word with him. But let's establish what you saw, Mr. Denholm. Was he near the center of the green?" "Well, not exactly the center," Denholm admitted. "More toward the hedge, but he could have crossed to the middle after I passed him." A convenient ambiguity, Miss Marple thought. People's memories often bend to match their fears. She moved a little nearer to Graves, speaking in the undertone he seemed to anticipate from her. "Henry Mullins is conscientious to a fault. He might walk early to avoid disturbing anyone, but is unlikely to place anything so conspicuously." Graves acknowledged this with a grunt that neither agreed nor disagreed. Shyness doesn't rule out foolish acts. "Quite," Miss Marple said, though her mind circled Denholm's phrasing. "Looked like Henry Mullins." Looked, but from what distance, in what light, and with what expectation of seeing someone peculiar? Graves asked Denholm one more question. Did he appear to be carrying anything unusual? Denholm hesitated a beat too long. Can't say. The hedgerow cast shadows. Convenient again. Graves dismissed the villagers for the moment, though most lingered within eavesdropping distance, disguised as casual strolling. Miss Marple crossed the green slowly, allowing her gaze to absorb the rhythms of the scene. Movement, posture, silence, each carried its own meaning. The snagged thread still clung to the bramble, stirring faintly. A soft reminder that accidents often told truer stories than deliberate actions. She found Henry Mullins near the grange exactly as reported. He was trimming a rose bush with steady, meticulous movements, his weathered face composed in its usual quiet neutrality. He looked up as Inspector Graves approached, offering a polite though wary nod. "Mullins," Graves began, "you were seen near the green early this morning." Henry blinked. "Aye. Passed by on my way here. About 7:30. Did you notice an umbrella there?" "No." His voice held no falter. "It would have been hard to miss, wouldn't it?" He resumed clipping, though his shoulders tightened. "Mr. Denholm claims he saw you near the hedgerow." Henry paused at that, lowering his shears. "Hedgerow runs the length, sir. Anyone going by would be near it. Didn't stop. Didn't leave anything." Miss Marple stepped forward softly. "Did your path take you close to the center of the green at all?" "No, miss. Straight along the edge as always." He gave her a brief, almost grateful glance, as though relieved by the fairness of her question. Graves studied him with narrowed eyes. "Any reason someone would want to imply you did something suspicious?" A muscle in Henry's jaw tensed. Folk talk when they've nowhere else to fill their morning. Miss Marple caught a flicker of something else hurt, perhaps, or fear of being misunderstood. People who lived quietly often feared the weight of false accusation, and St. Mary Mead, for all its charming cottages, could crush reputations with remarkable efficiency. As Graves stepped aside to confer with his constable, Henry returned to his pruning, though his hand trembled slightly. Miss Marple noted the tremor with a mixture of sympathy and caution. Innocence could tremble, guilt could too. Her attention drifted back toward the green, where Lily stood again by the gate, watching the exchange with a pale intensity. Not toward Henry, but toward the inspector's case with the umbrella inside it. A thought brushed faintly across Miss Marple's mind, not yet forming into clarity, but stirring like something just beneath the soil. Lily's fixed stare lingered just long enough for Miss Marple to notice the faint tremor in her breathing, an inward recoil rather than simple curiosity. Before the girl could retreat inside again, Miss Marple moved toward her with the gentle inevitability of someone who had spent a lifetime coaxing truth from frightened hearts. "You seem thoughtful, my dear," she said quietly. "Is it the inspector's questions troubling you?" Lily shook her head, though her hands betrayed her, fingers knotting around the edge of her apron. "No, not exactly. I just wish I hadn't seen it first. Everyone keeps asking what I noticed, but I didn't notice anything, not really." Miss Marple offered a mild smile. "Sometimes the trouble lies not in what we notice, but in what we recall later." Lily's gaze drifted again toward the inspector's case, then snapped away. A secret tugged at her, delicate and persistent. Miss Marple felt it like a faint shift in the air, something unsaid pressing for release. Before Lily could muster the courage, Inspector Graves called across the green. "Miss Marple, something here you may want to see." She excused herself with a reassuring touch on Lily's arm and walked toward Graves, who stood now at the base of the lamp-post. Beside him lay a small indentation in the grass, not as deep as the umbrella mark, but distinct enough once pointed out. "Another placement," Graves said. "Something stood here as well. Not large, perhaps a cane or a parasol." Could be unrelated, but the spacing suggests they formed a line. A path, Miss Marple murmured, squinting along the alignment of disturbances, or the suggestion of one. Graves nodded. Someone walked across the green and left something here momentarily before placing the umbrella. Miss Marple crouched with care, brushing a fingertip across the indentation. A faint crescent impression lay just beside it, like the curved edge of a small object. Not an everyday shape. Whatever it was, she said, it wasn't dropped by accident. A momentary pause, perhaps. A hesitation, almost a decision. She rose slowly, mind circling the earlier theme appearances versus intention. An object set down briefly. Why? To free a hand, to steady one's balance, or to conceal something? Graves motioned to his constable to photograph the mark, though Miss Marple suspected the subtle indent would vanish quickly in the afternoon light. Some clues lived in brief windows of visibility. Mrs. Hartnell, never far from dramatic opportunity, approached with her customary briskness. "Inspector, I can't help but feel something sinister is afoot. 2 marks in the grass. People don't stand in the middle of the green unless they're up to something." "Thank you, Mrs. Hartnell," Graves replied, his patience fraying. "We are investigating." She hovered anyway, craning to overhear. Miss Marple turned slightly, blocking the worst of her view. Graves lowered his voice. "You think this second mark matters?" "I think," Miss Marple said gently, "that when people are anxious, their hands betray them. They put things down when they mean to hold them, or pick up things they mean to leave behind." Graves made another note, though his eyes reflected more uncertainty than conviction. Miss Marple's attention drifted again to the snagged thread in the bramble. It fluttered with the breeze like a pale ghost of someone's passing. She moved to examine it once more before the constable noticed, careful not to disturb it. Under the sunlight, the thread revealed a faint sheen silk, likely. A fine garment, not typical of villagers on morning errands. A partial story emerged in her mind of a hesitating figure crossing the green, pausing, adjusting, leaving behind more than intended. And someone like Lily, observant yet unprepared, catching an impression she didn't know how to interpret. She rejoined Graves, who was consulting with Colonel Melrose near the path. The colonel's heavy brow was deeply furrowed. "If this umbrella business is connected to anything untoward," he muttered, "we must be cautious. There's been talk of thefts in neighboring villages." Graves considered this. Perhaps, though this seems a different sort of message. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed slightly. Message? Yes, that was closer to the truth. But message to whom? As she turned back toward the vicarage, she noticed Lily had reappeared on the steps, watching her with hesitant resolve, as though she had finally decided something, or realized she must. Miss Marple paused, offering the girl an encouraging nod, and saw Lily's lips part as if words were forming. But before they emerged, a distant shout cut across the green, shout sharp enough to turn every head. It came from the footpath leading to the old quarry. The shout from the quarry path rang out again, sharper this time, edged with panic rather than surprise. Villagers turned instinctively, forming a small, hesitant wave that moved toward the sound. Inspector Graves set off immediately, Colonel Melrose close behind. Miss Marple followed with measured steps. Her instincts alert, but steady haste was for those who feared what they might find, not for those determined to understand it. Halfway down the narrow path, they found Mr. Jackson, the groundskeeper from the manor, red-faced and breathless. He pointed a trembling hand toward the undergrowth. "They're just there by the stones." I nearly tripped over him, didn't see until I was right on top of him. Miss Marple felt the air constrict slightly. Graves crouched, clearing a few branches to reveal a man lying partly concealed behind a fallen slab of stone. His clothes were disheveled, his shirt streaked with soil, and one sleeve torn where the brambles had claimed it. The man was unconscious, breathing shallowly but unmistakably alive. Colonel Melrose let out a low, grim breath. "It's Arthur Penbridge, the new school bursar." Miss Marple's eyes softened with concern. Penbridge had arrived only a few months earlier, polite, self-effacing, with the slightly weary look of a man perpetually apologizing for existing, a harmless figure, or so he had seemed. Graves examined him briefly. No visible wounds beyond scratches. Looks like he collapsed, possibly fainted. His tone shifted, or was pushed. Mrs. Hartnell, having elbowed her way close enough to witness, gasped theatrically. "Pushed? Then the umbrella truly was a warning. I knew it, I said it, and now look." Graves silenced her with a raised hand. "We don't know anything yet." But Miss Marple watched the inspector's jaw tighten. A man found collapsed near the quarry path minutes after an odd object deliberately planted on the green. It was too near in time to be coincidence. As Penbridge was lifted carefully onto a stretcher brought by the constable, Miss Marple noticed a faint discoloration on the inside of his collar, a thin smear of greyish dust, like the fine residue found on old stone shelves or ironwork. Not from the path, not from the brambles. Something out of place. She tucked this away quietly. Once Penbridge had been carried toward the village infirmary, Graves turned to Mr. Jackson. "You didn't touch anything else? No one else passed here?" "Not a soul," Jackson said earnestly. "I come this way every morning." "Never seen him here before," Miss Marple interjected softly. "Did he appear to have walked here on his own, or fallen from the path?" Graves followed her gaze to the ground. The flattened grass and disturbed soil suggested a stagger rather than a fall. A man moving unsteadily, trying to keep upright. But moving from where? Graves' eyes sharpened. He wasn't coming from the school. This path leads toward the old quarry cottages. What business did he have there? Mrs. Weatherby, hovering nearby, provided an unexpected answer. "Well, Mrs. Penbridge rented one of those cottages for her sister last week. I heard them discussing furniture arrangements at the grocer's." "His wife?" Graves repeated with surprise. "I was under the impression he'd come alone." "He did," Mrs. Weatherby confirmed with relish. "But she arrived later. A delicate-looking woman with a rather serious expression. People said she was recovering from an illness." Recovering, Miss Marple noted, often excused behavior people didn't wish to question. Graves dismissed the gathering crowd and walked a few steps away with Miss Marple beside him. "Could this collapse be connected to the umbrella?" "It is connected," Miss Marple said gently, "but perhaps not in the way that seems most dramatic." Graves waited, expectant, but she offered no more. It was not time. They returned to the green where Lily waited anxiously near the vicarage gate, twisting the hem of her apron. The girl stepped forward the moment she saw Miss Marple, her face pale with urgency. "Miss Marple," she whispered, "there's something I didn't say before." Miss Marple gave her a small, steadying nod. "Tell me, dear." Lily hesitated, eyes flicking toward the inspector's case once more. "When I found the umbrella, I thought it was standing alone. But I think her breath hitch. I think someone was walking away from it." Miss Marple leaned in. "Someone you recognized?" "I'm not sure," Lily said, voice trembling. "It was only a shape. A coat, maybe. But something about the way they moved it didn't look like they wanted anyone to see them." A shadow of realization touched Miss Marple's expression. Quiet, subtle, forming edges, but not yet complete. And from somewhere behind them, a voice cut through the air with unexpected coldness. "Are you accusing someone, girl?" The cold voice belonged to Mrs. Penbridge, who stood framed in the vicarage gate as though the accusation she implied had already been settled in her mind. Her posture was rigid, her gloved hands clasped too tightly for a woman merely strolling. Lily shrank back instinctively, and Miss Marple stepped forward with a quiet, protective grace. No one is accusing anyone, Miss Marple said, her tone mild but firm. Lily is only describing what she believes she saw. Mrs. Penbridge's eyes, sharp, dark, and slightly sunken as though from sleepless nights, remain fixed on the girl. Children often think they see things when they don't, especially when they want attention. Lily flinched, and Miss Marple felt the faintest tightening in her own chest. A woman who dismissed fear so quickly often feared being questioned herself. Inspector Graves approached, sensing tension. "Mrs. Penbridge," he said, "I'd like a word with you shortly, regarding your husband's condition." "My husband's condition is private," she replied, chin lifting, "and as I told the doctor, he has spells. Exhaustion." She paused deliberately, allowing the uncertainty to settle. "Nothing that concerns the village." Graves exchanged a glance with Miss Marple, both recognizing the defensive edge. Mrs. Penbridge swept past them, her dark skirt brushing the gravel as she strode toward the infirmary, the picture of a woman holding herself together through sheer will. But Miss Marple noticed the smallest irregularity, a pale thread caught at the hem of her coat, near the seam, almost invisible, but not to someone looking for it. The same pale sheen as the thread caught on the bramble. She did not draw attention to it. Not yet. Graves exhaled heavily. She's hiding something, either about him or herself. "Perhaps both," Miss Marple murmured. Before Graves could pursue the thought, a constable hurried across the green. "Inspector, sir, you'd better come to the vicarage. It's about the umbrella." They followed him to the vestibule where the umbrella had been temporarily stored. Reverend Clement hovered anxiously nearby. "I only stepped out for a moment," he explained, "and when I returned, well, the umbrella lay on the floor. Not fallen, placed." The handle pointed deliberately toward the door, the silver band gleaming like an eye half open. And beside it, tucked just beneath the table, lay a folded scrap of paper. Graves retrieved it carefully, unfolding the small creased square. Miss Marple caught the faintest tremor in his brow as he read silently before passing it to her. 3 words, hastily written in uneven pencil strokes. "You must listen." Reverend Clement paled. "Who would leave such a thing in my home?" Miss Marple studied handwriting. Small, unsteady, uncertain. Not a threatening message, more like a plea. The spacing uneven, as if the writer had been trembling or rushing. "Someone frightened," she said quietly. "Someone who feels unheard." Graves drew a breath. Could it be Penbridge? Before he collapsed? Miss Marple shook her head. The strokes don't match a firm hand. And he was found far from here a short while later. "Lily?" Graves suggested reluctantly. "No," Miss Marple said gently. "Fear gives her a different manner." She paused, thoughtful. "This is someone trying to help, perhaps clumsily." Graves frowned, weighing possibilities. Every suspect seemed to shift like water around them. Henry Mullins with his quiet nerves, Mrs. Penbridge with her cold vigilance, and now an unknown hand delivering messages. Miss Marple inspected the umbrella once more. The silver band revealed a new detail under closer light, an almost imperceptible scratch beneath the area where the engraving had been erased. Not random. Straight. Purposeful. As though someone had tried to remove a second marking, one harder to reach. Something beneath the surface, again hidden but struggling to remain concealed. Graves leaned against the table. "Whoever placed it here, they were inside the vicarage. That narrows the field." Miss Marple didn't reply immediately. She was looking toward the window, where Lily stood just outside on the path, staring in as though afraid to step closer but unable to turn away. Her eyes were fixed not on the inspector, nor the note, but on the umbrella itself. And as Miss Marple watched, the girl's lips parted the smallest fraction, as if something she had been trying desperately to remember had finally, painfully surfaced. Lily hovered on the threshold, caught between fear and obligation, her fingers twisting the edge of her apron. Miss Marple approached her with the same gentle certainty she used when coaxing frightened sparrows from storm-soaked hedges. "My dear," she said softly, "something has just come back to you, hasn't it?" Lily swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to hide anything. I just wasn't sure. But when I saw the umbrella again just now, I remembered the sound." Inspector Graves stepped closer. "What sound, Lily?" She looked at him, then at Miss Marple, as though choosing who to trust. Crunching, on the gravel, someone walking away fast. "I thought it must have been Mr. Denholm going to open the post office, but it wasn't his walk. Too light, too hurried." Miss Marple nodded gently. "And you saw a shape?" "A coat." "Yes," Lily whispered. "A dark coat. But short, not long like Mr. Mullins wears, and the person held something in their handsome small thing. Not the umbrella. Something else." Graves raised an eyebrow. "Small? Like what?" "I don't know," she said miserably. "I only saw a glint." A glint. Miss Marple's thoughts linked it instantly to the faint scratch beneath the erased engraving on the umbrella's silver band. A tool of some sort. One could remove markings only with something sharp. Lily continued in a halting voice. "I wanted to tell you before, but when Mrs. Penbridge turned up, Miss Marple placed a reassuring hand on her arm." "You've done very well, Lily. It is not easy to speak when one fears being doubted." Graves considered this, frowning. A glint. Light footsteps. Short coat. That rules out Mullins, and likely Denholm. "It does," Miss Marple agreed. "But perhaps we should focus on those who had reason to remain unseen." Before Graves could reply, Reverend Clement reappeared in the doorway looking flustered. "Inspector, Colonel Melrose is asking for you. There's news from the infirmary about Mr. Penbridge." Graves set off at once. Miss Marple followed, Lily trailing close behind as if proximity offered safety. At the infirmary, they found Colonel Melrose standing stiffly beside a nurse. Graves approached him with a sharp, unspoken question. "He regained consciousness briefly," Melrose said, voice low. "Not enough to make a full statement, but he muttered something before fainting again." Graves straightened. "What did he say?" Melrose hesitated, aware of the cluster of ears behind him. "Don't let her," he recited quietly. Then he lost strength. The nurse couldn't hear the rest. Lily gasped softly. Miss Marple closed her eyes only for a moment, not in shock, but in recognition of a pattern beginning to form faint, unfinished, but no longer shapeless. Graves exhaled. Could he have meant his wife? Melrose frowned. "You heard Mrs. Penbridge, Inspector. She insisted on privacy, barred the door, nearly refused the doctor entry until I intervened. Behavior that suggests worry, perhaps, but not guilt." Miss Marple opened her eyes. "Not necessarily worried," she murmured. "Sometimes people hide because they fear something being found out, even if that something is not a crime." Graves turned to her. "Meaning what?" Miss Marple didn't answer directly. She was looking at Lily again, who stared at her as if silently asking permission to reveal one more truth. Miss Marple nodded subtly, and Lily spoke. "There's something else," she whispered. "Yesterday at the vicarage I saw Mrs. Penbridge crying in the garden. She thought she was alone. She kept saying, 'Not again, not again.'" Melrose stiffened. "She told me they moved here for a quiet life." "Fresh start," she said. "He's nervous about her health." Miss Marple's gaze drifted to the umbrella once more in the inspector's case, the silver band reflecting a narrow strip of afternoon light. Every object left in plain sight had a story behind it, and some stories were simply fragments waiting to be correctly arranged. Graves rubbed his temple. "So we have Penbridge collapsed under suspicious circumstances. His wife behaves in ways that don't match her explanations. Someone placed an umbrella as if to draw attention. And a note." "Notes," Miss Marple corrected quietly, "written in moments of fear." Fear can come from guilt, but also from truth no one wishes to believe. Graves stared at her. Are you saying the wrong person is under suspicion? Miss Marple offered a thin, thoughtful smile, neither confirming nor denying. Appearances, Inspector, are the most convincing liars in the world. Before he could respond, a soft knock came from behind them. The nurse stepped forward. Inspector, Mrs. Penbridge has returned. She says she must speak with you, immediately. Miss Marple felt Lily tense beside her, and saw that even the breeze from the corridor seemed to hesitate at the prospect of what the woman might reveal. Mrs. Penbridge entered the infirmary's narrow corridor with a composure so tightly held it resembled a mask. Her hands were clasped neatly before her, gloves still on despite the stuffy warmth. She looked first at Colonel Melrose, then Inspector Graves, and only lastly at Miss Marple, though aware that the elderly woman saw more than courtesy required. I must speak to you, she said, her voice firm but trembling beneath its veneer. Privately, if you please. Graves shook his head. Mrs. Penbridge, anything relevant to your husband's condition is best said openly. We have no wish to misinterpret your meaning. A flash of irritation crossed her eyes. Quick, almost buried, but enough for Miss Marple to note. Controlled emotion, not absent emotion. Very well, Mrs. Penbridge said. But I will not be spoken to as though I am a suspect. No one has said you are, Graves replied smoothly. Please tell us what you came to say. Mrs. Penbridge pressed her gloved fingers together. Arthur has been unwell. For some time now, he has episodes, fainting, confusion, panic. It has nothing to do with umbrellas or messages or village fancies. He overexerts himself, that is all. Colonel Melrose stiffened, but he muttered something. Don't let her. Mrs. Penbridge's face hardened. He was delirious. Miss Marple stepped gently forward. Delirium often reveals truth, my dear. Not always in words, but in tone. Mrs. Penbridge's breath caught barely, but enough. I have cared for my husband through illness after illness, she said tightly. We came here for peace. And now you are all determined to tear it apart. Graves observed her with quiet intensity. Why bar the doctor from seeing him earlier? Her eyes flashed. He frightens easily. And strangers are sometimes convenient shields, Miss Marple murmured. The woman's composure faltered for the briefest second. Not a crack, just a tremor beneath a polished surface. Graves pressed on. Mrs. Penbridge, your husband was not found near your cottage. He was found near the quarry path, and he bore grey dust under his collar, not soil. It means nothing, she whispered. It means something to someone, Miss Marple said gently. Perhaps even to you. The silence afterward settled like a held breath. Mrs. Penbridge's eyes shifted toward the inspector's case, toward the umbrella faintly visible within it. For a moment she looked genuinely frightened, as though the object carried a memory she could not bear to revisit. Then she pulled herself upright again. I will not answer questions intended to trap me. I came only to say that Arthur must not be upset further. He is fragile. That is all. She turned sharply, as though fleeing from something she could not name, and disappeared down the corridor with brisk, echoing steps. Graves exhaled. She's hiding something, but she'll never admit it outright. Most people don't, Miss Marple replied. Truth often needs a gentler invitation. Lily, who had lingered silently near the doorway, stepped closer. Miss Marple, do you think she placed the umbrella? Miss Marple considered the trembling thread she'd seen snagged on Mrs. Penbridge's coat. I think she touched it, she said softly. But touching and placing are not always the same. Graves frowned, rubbing the bridge of his nose. This case is getting stranger by the hour. Someone plants an umbrella as though leaving a signpost. A man collapses. A wife lies. A note appears inside the vicarage. and we still don't know the meaning of any of it." Miss Marple looked toward the window where the evening light had begun to dim, casting long shadows across the infirmary wall, thin silhouettes that stretched farther than expected. "Meaning," she said quietly, "is often obscured by fear, and fear spreads quickly." Graves sighed. "Then who is afraid?" "Nearly everyone," Miss Marple replied. "But the reasons differ." The inspector's frustration sharpened. "We need something solid, something more than impressions." Miss Marple turned her head slightly, listening. The corridor carried faint echoes, soft footsteps approaching, hesitant, uneven. Not Mrs. Penbridge's brisk tread, not the nurse's light shoes. A small, hesitant knock sounded on the doorframe. Henry Mullins stood there, his cap twisting nervously between his hands. His eyes darted from Miss Marple to Graves, then to the umbrella case with unmistakable dread. "I have to tell you summit," he said, voice strained. "I kept quiet earlier, but I saw the summit more than I said." Miss Marple's expression shifted, still calm, but alert, as though a chess piece had been nudged into an unexpected position. Henry swallowed. "It's about the umbrella, and who was near it before Lily found it?" Henry Mullins stood just inside the infirmary doorway, cap crumpled in his hands, eyes fixed on the floor as though the truth he carried might scatter if he looked anyone directly in the face. Inspector Graves motioned him further into the room, but Henry hesitated until Miss Marple offered a small, reassuring nod. "You said you saw something, Henry," Graves prompted. Henry swallowed. I did. Earlier this morning, before Lily found the umbrella." Miss Marple's gaze softened. "Take your time, dear." He nodded, gripping his cap tighter. "I was cutting along the footpath by the green, trying to get to the Grange before the sun got too strong. And I saw someone bent over in the grass, near where the umbrella was stuck." Graves straightened. "Bent over. Doing what?" "I couldn't see properly," Henry answered. "Their backs were to me. It looked like they were fiddling with the summit, or picking at something." A hush settled over the corridor, brittle and expectant. "Who was it, Henry?" Graves asked, voice steady. Henry lifted his eyes at last, only briefly. "I didn't want to say, but it was Mrs. Penbridge." Lily gasped. Colonel Melrose muttered something sharp under his breath. Graves' expression hardened into troubled focus. Miss Marple, however, remained still, her eyes on Henry, though her mind travelled elsewhere. "You are certain, Henry?" she asked gently. "Was it her coat? Her posture?" "Aye," Henry said with quiet conviction. "Dark coat. Same as she had on this morning, and her hair pinned up properly. She turned her head a bit, just enough for me to know." He shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't want to assume the worst. Folks often do." Miss Marple inclined her head. "And that was good of you." Graves exhaled, running a hand through his hair. If she was near the umbrella before it was found, after her husband collapsed, and after denying everything, Miss Marple raised a hand. "Perhaps we should be cautious, Inspector. A half-truth can be more dangerous than a lie." Henry looked torn between relief and guilt. "I'm sorry I didn't speak earlier. I just didn't want trouble for her." She seemed troubled enough. "She is," Miss Marple murmured. Graves paced once. Mrs. Penbridge's behaviour, her husband's collapse, her presence on the green, the thread on her coat all point to something. But whether guilt or protection, I don't yet know. "Protection," Miss Marple murmured, almost to herself. "Yes, that seems nearer." Lily approached timidly. "Miss Marple, if she was at the green, could she have written the note? The one that said, 'You must listen'?" Miss Marple shook her head. "No, dear. That handwriting was frightened by not being controlled. Mrs. Penbridge writes with precision. Even her anger is neat." Graves blinked. "You've seen her handwriting?" On the vicarage subscription sheet, Miss Marple replied mildly. People reveal more in their loops and slants than they do in conversation. Colonel Melrose cleared his throat. What troubles me most is that Penbridge's collapse and her presence at the Green might be linked. If he confronted her, Colonel Miss Marple said softly, "Not every confrontation ends in violence. Sometimes it ends in desperation, or a plea." Everyone fell silent at that. A nurse hurried down the corridor just then, her expression anxious. Inspector Mr. Penbridge is awake again, only briefly perhaps, but asking his wife. Graves turned at once. "We need to hear what he says." Miss Marple held up a hand. "No, Inspector. If he is asking for her, questioning him now may shut him down entirely. People speak more honestly when they believe they are unheard." Graves stared. "You mean to let her go in first?" Miss Marple nodded once. A momentary glimpse into a truth spoken privately can reveal far more than pointed interrogation. Lily looked up at her with wide eyes. "But we won't hear them." Miss Marple smiled faintly. Sometimes the most important part of a conversation is not the words themselves, but the reactions that follow. Graves hesitated, then relented. "Very well. She goes in first. But only for a minute." Mrs. Penbridge was sent for at once. She arrived looking pale, tense, ready to fend off further questioning. "He is awake," she whispered, the mask slipping for the first time. "For now," Graves said. "He's asked for you." Fear and Bear flickered across her expression before she could suppress it. She stepped toward the door, hand trembling over the latch. Miss Marple watched her, noticing the subtle quiver in her breath, the tightening of her jaw markers not of guilt, but of a long-held dread. As Mrs. Penbridge pushed open the door to her husband's room, Miss Marple shifted slightly, angling herself where she could observe the woman's face as she entered. For truth did not always appear in confession. Sometimes it appeared the instant before. Mrs. Penbridge slipped into her husband's room with a controlled breath, her posture braced as though the very air might accuse her. Miss Marple, standing just outside with Inspector Graves and Colonel Melrose, watched the woman's face in the instant before the door close, a flicker of fear, tenderness, and something heavier, older. It was enough to confirm what Miss Marple had quietly suspected, the truth rooted deeper than the village imagined. Inside, faint murmurs began, a woman's strained whisper, a man's rasped reply. Graves leaned nearer, frustration tightening in his jaw. "We can't hear a word." "We don't need the words," Miss Marple said softly. "We need the aftermath." The corridor waited in weighted silence. Lily, standing behind Miss Marple, clasped her hands anxiously. Henry Mullins lingered farther back in the shadows, twisting his cap. Then came a sudden, cracked sombrief, stifled, followed by Mrs. Penbridge's soft exclamation, not of shock, but of something closer to weary surrender. The door trembled slightly as she leaned against it, steadying herself. A moment later she emerged, pale and rigid, her eyes refusing to meet theirs. "Inspector," she said quietly, "Arthur wishes to speak with you now." He is calmer. Miss Marple stepped aside, letting Graves and Melrose enter. She remained in the hall, guiding Lily gently away from the doorway. Inside, the bursar lay propped against pillows, his complexion grey, breath shallow but steadier. His eyes flickered uncertainly toward the inspectorary. Hesitant. "Mr. Penbridge," Graves began, "your wife says you have something to tell us." The man swallowed, glancing toward the closed door, as though checking whether she stood behind it. "She shouldn't be troubled," he murmured hoarsely. "She suffered enough." Graves leaned forward. Henry Mullins saw her near the green before the umbrella was discovered, and she denied it. "Why?" Penbridge winced. "She only meant to protect me. She thought people would misunderstand." Colonel Melrose crossed his arms. "Protect you from what exactly?" Penbridge shut his eyes briefly, as though gathering courage. It wasn't supposed to happen here. We moved to St. Mary Mead because it was quiet, safe, no eyes always watching. From what? Graves repeated. Penbridge's voice cracked. A misunderstanding. In our old village, or an accusation, people are quick to believe the worst. Miss Marple, listening from the doorway, tilted her head. Accusation of what, Mr. Penbridge? The man was startled. He had not realized she'd stepped inside, but something about her steady gaze made resistance futile. I was accused of stealing funds, he whispered. From the school, accounts I never touched, but the board believed I had been careless. My nerves were frayed. My wife feared what the gossip might become. She thought the fresh start would give me peace. Graves' brow furrowed. And the umbrella? Why was she near it? Penbridge's hand trembled. She recognized it. That drew full silence. Recognize it? Graves echoed. Penbridge nodded weakly. It belonged to the headmaster of my old school. He was the one who believed I'd taken the money. He never said it plainly, but his suspicion ruined me. When Helen, my wife down, saw the umbrella on the green this morning, she panicked. She thought he had come here, that he wanted to drag us back into that nightmare again. Miss Marple stepped closer. Did you see him? The headmaster? Penbridge shook his head. No. But Helen, she must have. Or thought she did. That's why she tried to hide the umbrella. She thought if she could remove the sign, the past wouldn't follow us. Graves frowned, but the engraving was scraped off. That took time. Tools. Penbridge looked away. She carries a nail file with her. She tries to keep things perfect, even when they aren't. Miss Marple felt Lily tense beside her, understanding dawning in the girl's wide eyes. This morning, Penbridge continued, I went to find her. She'd gone out early, saying she needed air. When I reached the quarry path, I felt dizzy. A spell. I remember calling her name. Then nothing. Graves exhaled, conflicted. So she found the umbrella, because she feared someone from your past brought it here. Yes, Penbridge whispered. She thought it meant danger. Colonel Melrose shook his head. But why put it in the middle of the green? Penbridge's gaze clouded. I don't know. Fear makes Helen act strangely. Miss Marple considered this, her mind turning like a wheel catching each spoke in precise rhythm. Fear explained much, but not everything. Not the note, not the faint thread on the bramble, not the second indentation in the grass, and certainly not the fact that the headmaster's umbrella, if indeed it had been his, had appeared in St. Mary Mead at all. Graves leaned back, unsatisfied. Mr. Penbridge, did anyone else know of your past trouble? Anyone who might be following you? Threatening you? Penbridge shook his head. We told no one. We kept to ourselves. Miss Marple touched the umbrella case with a single thoughtful finger. And yet, she said quietly, someone in this village knew exactly which object would frighten your wife. The room stilled. Penbridge looked up sharply. But who? Miss Marple's eyes drifted to the corridor, where Lily now stood very still, as though struck by a sudden, unsettling understanding. And then the softest expression crossed Miss Marple's face, milled, almost sorrowful. For she had just glimpsed the shape of the truth through the slant between appearance and intention. Lily's stillness in the corridor drew Miss Marple's attention, even before Penbridge finished speaking. The girl's face had gone pale, nor with fear, but with dawning recognition, as though a puzzle she had not wished to assemble now forced its final pieces into place. Miss Marple moved gently toward her. "My dear," she murmured, "you've just remembered something else, haven't you?" Lily's eyes flickered, then lowered. I didn't understand it at first, but now, after what Mr. Penbridge said, it makes sense. Inspector Graves turned sharply. "What makes sense, Lily? Speak plainly." She looked past him toward the umbrella case. "The man who owns that umbrella I've seen before." A taut silence followed. "Where?" Graves demanded. "Here. In the village." Lily nodded with small, trembling certainty. "Last week. At the post office. He was posting a parcel. I remember because he was arguing with Mr. Denholm about the cost. He said something about returning what wasn't his to keep." Miss Marple exchanged a quiet glance with Graveson that shifted the axis of the case entirely. "Did you hear his name?" Miss Marple asked softly. Lily shook her head. "But I remember his voice. Deep, sharp, and he had a limp, just a little one. He leaned slightly whenever he turned." Graves stiffened. "And you're certain it's the same umbrella?" "I didn't think anything of it then," Lily whispered. "But when I saw it on the green, I felt like I'd seen it before, but didn't know why." Penbridge, hearing this from his bed, raised himself weakly. The headmaster had a limp, from an old cricket injury. A tremor passed through him. "You think he came here?" Graves straightened. "If he was here a week ago, why would he leave the umbrella just this morning?" Miss Marple folded her hands gently. "Because fear travels slowly at first. People convince themselves they imagine danger until something forces the truth to surface." Graves frowned. "But what forced it this morning?" Miss Marple's voice softened. "The parcel." Everyone turned. Lily blinked. "The parcel?" "The headmaster posted something here," Miss Marple said, "a week ago. Something he wished to return. Something connected to Mr. Penbridge's innocence or guilt. And Mr. Denholm, handling all the post, would have known that parcel was addressed to Mr. Penbridge. He would have known the sender, know the handwriting." Colonel Melrose drew a sharp breath. "Are you saying Denholm has been hiding something?" Miss Marple inclined her head. "More than hiding, Colonel. He has been trying to control a narrative before it could control him." Graves stared at her. "Meaning what?" "Meaning," Miss Marple replied gently, "that Mr. Denholm was the one tampering with the accounts at Mr. Penbridge's old school." Penbridge's breath hitched. "Denholm? But how?" "He used to work at that school as a clerk before coming here," Miss Marple said. "It was mentioned in a parish newsletter when he first arrived. He had access to the petty cash, the ledgers, and the very records you were accused of mishandling." Graves swore quietly under his breath. Miss Marple continued, her tone calm, precise. "The headmaster suspected an insider, and when he discovered irregularities after Mr. Denholm left, he must have traced the first signs of deception, but instead of confronting anyone openly, he chose to gather proof. Proof he believed Mr. Penbridge might need. Penbridge looked overwhelmed. He tried to help me." "Yes," Miss Marple said gently. "He sent you a parcel here, likely documents vindicating you or evidence implicating someone else. Mr. Denholm must have recognized the sender's name and panicked." Graves nodded grimly. "So Denholm intercepted the parcel?" "Precisely," Miss Marple said. "Fear makes people desperate, and guilt makes them unpredictable." Lily trembled. Then the umbrella. "He left it on the green," Miss Marple said, "as a threat. A warning. To frighten Mrs. Penbridge, to unsettle Mr. Penbridge, to make them doubt their own peace, to keep them from asking questions about a parcel that never arrived." Colonel Melrose frowned. "But why place it so openly?" "To appear as if someone else had placed it," Miss Marple replied. Mrs. Penbridge touching it afterward only muddied the waters. Graves leaned forward, urgency sharpening his voice. "Then what about the collapse? Did Denholm?" Miss Marple shook her head. "No. Mr. Penbridge collapsed from his own frailty, but I suspect Mr. Denholm followed him, intending to retrieve anything the headmaster might have delivered in person. When he saw Mrs. Penbridge discover the umbrella, he used that to shift suspicion." Lily's eyes widened. And the note, "You must listen." "A warning from someone frightened," Miss Marple said softly. "Someone who saw Denholm near the vicarage. Someone who didn't know whom to trust." "Who?" Graves pressed. Miss Marple glanced toward the window. A small figure stood outside, half hidden, hesitant, watching them with wide, frightened eyes. The post office trainee, a boy of 15, often overlooked, always silent. He must have seen Denholm steal the parcel, and feared speaking ever since. Miss Marple exhaled gently. "Appearances deceive," she murmured, "but fear leaves very honest footprints." Graves turned sharply toward the door. "We need to speak to that boy now." Miss Marple watched the inspector stride away, and in the hush that followed, she felt the faint shift of the final truth aligning itself, soft as a curtain drawing closed. The boy stood just inside the vicarage study, shoulders hunched, hands jammed deep in his pockets, as though hoping invisibility might still save him. Inspector Graves positioned himself nearby, not unkind, but firm, while Colonel Melrose lingered at the edge of the hearth. Miss Marple took the chair nearest the boy, lowering herself with the soft dignity of someone who wished to shorten the distance between truth and fear. "You left the note, didn't you?" she said gently. The boy's chin wobbled. He nodded. Graves kept his voice even. "Tell us what happened." "From the beginning." The boy hesitated until Miss Marple leaned slightly forward, a small, encouraging gesture that seemed to loosen the knot in his chest. "I saw Mr. Denholm take the parcel," he whispered. "It came in last Thursday. Brown paper, string tied like the ones from the school offices." He looked at the name on it, Mr. Penbridge, and his face changed. Like he'd swallowed something sharp, and he didn't put it on the shelf like he should have. He hid it behind the counter until he could take it home. Miss Marple nodded, unsurprised. "You thought if you spoke up, Mr. Denholm would fire you. Or worse. He said he could make sure I never found another job," the boy muttered. "Said people listened to him." And I thought, what if he was right? Graves's jaw tightened. He used fear as leverage. The boy nodded miserably. "I thought if I put the umbrella on the green, folks would see something was wrong, that someone was trying to frighten the Penbridges. I didn't think he'd follow me. Or that Mrs. Penbridge would touch it, or that everyone would look everywhere except at him." Miss Marple's voice softened. "Fear rarely chooses the most reasonable path, dear. It chooses the path that feels possible." The boy wiped his sleeve across his eyes. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I only wanted someone to listen." Graves straightened. "And the umbrella? How did you get it?" "Mr. Denholm had it at the post office," the boy whispered. "I think the man, the headmaster, left it behind by accident when he posted the parcel. I saw Denholm pick it up later. I wanted people to see it, to make them ask questions he couldn't answer." Miss Marple folded her hands, absorbing the final piece. The thread on the bramble, the second indentation on the green, the glint Lily had seen in hurried hands, the erased engraving, the fear of a woman trying to outrun her husband's past, the collapse of a man worn thin by suspicion. A tapestry assembled from frayed strands only appeared tangled until one stood back far enough. Graves released a slow breath. "We'll bring Denholm in at once. He has explaining to do." Melrose grunted, forging accounts, hiding evidence, and frightening a family for his own sake. Despicable. But Miss Marple shook her head softly. "Desperation," she corrected. "Desperation leads people down narrow, unkind paths, and once a lie grows long enough, it begins to walk beside you like a shadow you cannot shake." The inspector left to fetch the postmaster, and the constables followed. The boy remained seated with Miss Marple, who waited until the room quieted before turning to him. "You are brave," she said. "Frightened people rarely know they are. But you found a way, clumsy, perhaps, but a way nonetheless. The boy's eyes shimmered with both relief and shame. "Will I be dismissed?" Miss Marple smiled faintly. "I suspect Reverend Clement may find a place for you here at the vicarage until matters settle. And later, the post office may find its staff reorganized." He almost smiled. Later that afternoon, the village grew hushed as word spread to the fevered gossip of accusation, but the gentler murmur of understanding. Denholm had been taken into custody with a pale, resigned expression. The truth had cornered him at last. Mrs. Penbridge walked alone along the green at dusk, her steps slow, uncertain. Miss Marple reached her quietly. "My dear," she said softly, "your husband will recover in time. So will you. Fear is a heavy cloak. It takes practice to put it down." Mrs. Penbridge's eyes filled with exhausted gratitude. "I only ever wanted to keep him safe." "I know," Miss Marple said, "but safety built on silence cannot last." They stood together a moment, watching the wind stir the grass. Where the umbrella had once stood, now just an ordinary patch of earth, no longer burdened with meaning. By evening, calm returned to St. Mary Mead with the same soft inevitability as a kettle settling after a boil. Windows glowed. Voices drifted from kitchen tables. Life, with all its stubborn steadiness, resumed. Miss Marple walked home beneath the fading light, the village exhaling around her. Behind lace curtains, people resumed their rituals, quiet cups of tea, well-polished routines, the comforting rustle of daily respectability. Appearances restored. But truth, she knew, had its own gentle place among them, subtle, persistent, and patient. And she, ever a student of human nature, walked on with a serene melancholy, knowing how fragile peace could be, and how tenderly it must be held.